Everything you were taught about the Dark Continent was a lie. While Europe was stumbling through its dark ages, African architects were building skyscrapers of stone. Their kings were so wealthy they literally crashed the global economy just by going on vacation. But why were these empires erased from our maps? Today, we're reclaiming the kingdoms history tried to forget. History remembers the conquerors, the empires that wrote books about themselves. But what happens when entire kingdoms are erased or deliberately rewritten? Long before Europe rose, Africa was home to cities of gold and armies of iron. Africa was home to universities, astronomers, and engineers. Yet somehow many grew up believing Africa had no great civilizations. That lie did not happen by accident. Tonight, we uncover the lost African kingdoms, the kingdoms they could not destroy, so they erased instead. From the bronze warriors of Benin to the Black Pharaohs of Kush, the superpower of Aksum, and the mysterious stone city of Great Zimbabwe. These were not primitive societies. These were empires. And the world was terrified of them. The kingdom of bronze and blood. Deep in the forests of Nigeria stood the Benin Empire. It was not just rich, it was organized, advanced, and feared. European travelers arriving in the 1400s described wide streets and massive walls. Royal palaces were covered in bronze artwork rivaling anything in Europe. The walls of Benin were some of the largest earthworks ever created. At the center stood the Oba, the divine king whose word was law. But the true genius of Benin was its art. The famous Benin bronzes were not simple decorations. They were historical records carved into metal. Every bronze plaque told a story. Warriors, queens, and royal ceremonies. And Europe could not believe Africans created them. When British forces invaded in 1897, they burned the city and thousands of artworks were stolen, not because they were worthless, because they were proof that Africa had greatness long before colonization. Even today, many treasures remain in European museums, miles away from their creators, but the spirit of Benin never truly died. Its art changed global understanding forever, and its memory haunts the empire that tried to erase it. The Black Pharaohs who conquered Egypt. South of ancient Egypt, along the Nile River, rose a kingdom many history books barely mention, the kingdom of Kush. And for a time, Kush did the impossible. It conquered Egypt itself. Most people imagine pharaohs as belonging only to Egypt, but the rulers of Kush became pharaohs too. They ruled as Egypt's 25th dynasty. These were the Black Pharaohs, warrior kings from Nubia who marched north and took control of one of the greatest civilizations on earth. Their leader, King Pi, launched a brutal military campaign across Egypt in the 8th century BCE. City after city surrendered. Temple after temple bowed before Kushite power. But Kush was more than war. It was rich in gold, iron trade, and knowledge. Its capital cities, Napata and later Meroe, became centers of culture and engineering. The people of Kush mastered iron production so effectively that some historians call Meroe the Birmingham of ancient Africa. Imagine that, an industrial iron city in Africa over 2,000 years ago. Yet many people never hear about it. The Kushites also built pyramids, hundreds of them. In fact, Sudan today contains more pyramids than Egypt. But unlike Egypt's pyramids, the pyramids of Kush remain hidden from global attention. Why? Because history often shines its brightest light where power wants people to look. And for centuries, African greatness was pushed into the shadows. But the Kushites were impossible to erase completely. Their bloodline, culture, and influence spread across Northeast Africa for centuries. They proved something the world desperately tried to deny. Africa did not merely participate in ancient civilization. Africa shaped it, while Europe struggled through chaos after the fall of Rome. An African kingdom was becoming one of the most important powers on earth. The Kingdom of Aksum, located in modern Ethiopia and Eritrea, Aksum controlled trade routes connecting Africa, Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean world. Ivory, gold, spices, glass, silk. Everything moved through Aksum. At its peak, Persian writers considered Aksum one of the four great powers, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. Think about that. An African empire ranked beside the greatest civilizations on Earth. Aksum built massive stone monuments called stelae, towering into the sky like giant carved needles. Some weighed hundreds of tons, and somehow ancient engineers transported and raised them without modern machines. But perhaps Aksum's greatest weapon was not military power, it was adaptation. The kingdom became one of the earliest major empires to adopt Christianity in the 4th century, long before much of Europe. This transformed Aksum into a religious and cultural powerhouse. Legends even claim the sacred Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia. Whether true or not, the story became part of Aksum's mythic identity. But no empire lasts forever. Trade routes shifted, rival powers rose. Isolation slowly weakened Aksum, and eventually the kingdom faded into history. Yet its descendants survived. The foundations of Ethiopian civilization were built on Aksumite strength. And even today, echoes of Aksum remain carved into the mountains, silent reminders of a forgotten superpower. The stone city Europe refused to believe existed. Then there is the kingdom that completely shattered colonial myths, Great Zimbabwe. A massive stone city built between the 11th and 15th centuries in southern Africa. No mortar, no cement, just millions of carefully stacked granite blocks rising into giant walls and towers. The city was enormous. At its height, thousands lived there. It controlled major gold trade routes stretching to the Indian Ocean. Merchants from Arabia, Persia, and Asia traded with Great Zimbabwe. This was not an isolated settlement. It was an economic powerhouse. But when European colonizers later discovered the ruins, many refused to accept Africans built them. Some blamed foreigners. Others invented bizarre theories involving lost white civilizations. Anything except the truth. Because admitting Africans created a city this advanced would destroy the racist ideas used to justify colonization. So history was manipulated. Evidence was ignored. And the builders of Great Zimbabwe were erased from their own masterpiece. But archaeology exposed the lie. The ancestors of the Shona people built Great Zimbabwe. Africans built it, Africans ruled it, Africans engineered it. Its walls still stand today like a challenge to the world, a warning carved in stone: you can bury truth, but you cannot kill it forever. Why these kingdoms were forgotten? So why were these civilizations erased from mainstream history? Because history is not just about facts, it is about power. Colonial systems needed Africa to appear weak, uncivilized, and dependent. It justified slavery. It justified exploitation. It justified conquest. If people understood the true history of kingdoms like Benin, Kush, Aksum, and Great Zimbabwe, the entire colonial narrative would begin to collapse. And so textbooks became weapons, silence became strategy. Generations grew up knowing the names of European kings while never hearing about African emperors who changed the world. But today, that silence is breaking. African history is rising again, not as myth, not as fantasy, but as truth. The lost kingdoms were never truly lost, only hidden. And now the world is finally being forced to remember. Because the greatest stories in history are often the ones someone tried hardest to erase. If this changed the way you see Africa, subscribe for more untold histories, forgotten empires, and the truths the world buried for centuries.